Mullinger's Weekly Ramble.
Hello, my friends. It is Wednesday, the 15th of October, 2025, which, if you can believe it, means it is time for episode 70 of Mullinger's Weekly Ramble. I know, 70. That means that I have been firmly ensconced within your ears for 69 hours. This will be the 70th hour that I have been in your ears at this time every week. Thank you so much for listening. I've had a very exciting week. I've got lots to talk about. We are back to morning recordings. It is early morning. I have one son still in bed, so I probably shouldn't be shouting. My other son and my wife are currently at the gym, although I am looking out the window at the beautiful Kennebecasis River, and the water is like glass out there. It is perfect kayaking weather. The last few weeks, it has not been perfect kayaking weather. In the early mornings, it has been a bit of a rough and tumble situation out there. On Sunday, we had actually given up all hope, and I brought the kayaks back up to the house. But I am thinking that when my son gets back, I may cut this podcast, not short, obviously. I mean, you might not even know. What I might do is pause it, or stop it, and then the two bits will be spliced together. I need to tell you this. You don't need to know this. This is no consequence, because actually, if I do stop the podcast and go off, in theory, we could seamlessly just smooth over that. But I've banged on about it, so I may as well. If I do that, if they come back and I decide to go down and see if he wants to go out on the Kennebecasis River for a quick kayak, I will let you know. How's that? Anyway, speaking of modes of transportation, does a kayak count as a mode of transportation? I don't know. Oh, very quickly, I'm looking at a postcard above my desk right now. It is a postcard that I bought on eBay of the beautiful. It's the Renforth Wharf, but it's a postcard from, I would say, the 60s. Let me see what the postmark says. It is a postcard from 1975, and it says Beach and Pier, Rothesay, New Brunswick. And the photo is by someone called Marty Sheffer, and I had to buy it on eBay because not only is it a beautiful postcard of one of my favourite places in the world, the Renforth Wharf, but basically the happiest days of summer I spent jumping off that. On the back, it's a postcard that was sent to Mr. and Mrs. S. Nutt in Oakville, Churchill Avenue in Oakville. The stamp is a stamp of the Queen. It is an 8-cent stamp. I guess that's of some interest, especially the Canada Post strike is over, or rather, it is in essence temporarily over, or there's one day on, one day off. But no one seems to know this. It is a great time if you have mountains of packages, as we do, hundreds, possibly thousands of packages piling up to be sent out, from magazine orders to merch orders to... Oh, incidentally, this is a good chance... No, we're talking about a strike, James. Don't use this opportunity to plug your own merch. I do have new merch. It's my 2026 T-shirt merch. Anyway, but that's inappropriate. We're talking about a serious strike, and... shout out to the workers and everyone at Canada Post, and I hope you're all bearing up. It hasn't seemed to be, again, I guess it's a news situation, but the point is the post offices are open again, and it's great news now, because I thought there was going to be massive lineups everywhere, and I went in and there was no lineups anywhere, and it transpires this is because, according to my friends at Canada Post, no one seems to know that the strike is at the very least paused. Anyway, I collect stamps and old postcards. My dad is and would be very proud. Is very proud. He would be, and he is. Anyway, this is a great start. Is this the most ramble open? Was the podcast more clear and concise when I recorded it in the evening last week? The first ever episode ever recorded in the evening, the 69er episode. Answers on a postcard, if you will. There's a good way to get... I wonder if everyone who ever did that was a secret postcard collector. Answers on a postcard. I collect postcards, I collect stamps. Good way to get people to send me postcards and stamps. My point is, on the back of this postcard, it is written, Dear Lynn and Steve, think... the first line is, and yet this is in reference to the fact, the reason I had to buy this was in reference to my jokes about when I moved here, I thought I lived in St. John, but then it turned out I live a couple of minutes past the St. John border, so I actually live in Rossay. But then I said that on a CBC show, and then a lady came up to me in the street and said, "You don't live in Rossay, you live in Renforth." And then I told someone, Tony Rickett, the owner of Dunham's Run Vineyard, that I lived in Renforth, and he was the mayor of Renforth in the 1980s, it turns out. And he says, "You don't live in Renforth, you live in East Riverside." Someone else said, "I live in Kingshurst." No one knows where I live. Is it the KV? No one knows. The boundary lines, the Rossay Quispamsis boundary lines are very... Anyway, so my point is, I've made lots of jokes about this over the years, and not least when I met the person who lives on the house that crosses the Rossay Quispamsis border. He said that his house literally goes over the border, and so the best way we could describe this was he has his breakfast in Quispamsis and he excretes it in Rossay. So this postcard says, "Dear Lynn and Steve, think this should be Renforth and not Rossay." So it is nice to know that this debate, that's the first line of the postcard. It's nice to know that the Rossay-Renforth debate has been raging for literally decades. This is a postcard from the 1970s of the beach in Pier in Rossay, and the first line of the postcard is someone basically freaking out because it should say Renforth and not Rossay. "We went to the regatta and saw dozens of folks, but all my brownies and dad's scouts have grown up so much it is hard to recognise them. We are back at Netters now and will come home on Tuesday. Sorry about the animal problems. Sorry about all the animal problems, Steve. See you soon. Mum, Dad, Mike and Chris." What animal problems? Okay, well, there we go. There's a fun challenge for the Ramblers. My goodness, sorry, that's 7 minutes, and I didn't even... I'm supposed to start with a sponsor read, and I got distracted by a postcard above my desk. This is the problem with my office, I think. I need to work somewhere else. It's why sometimes when I go to write my book, I go to the Quispamsis Library and sit in a corner and face a wall. My office is surrounded with memorabilia, props, trinkets, collectibles, photographs. I'm looking at photographs right now of actually this time a year ago, I was in Jamaica with my wife for her 50th birthday. And yes, indeed, this in 2 days' time, this Friday is her 51st birthday. The 50th, I will be getting into a 51st state. I'll be getting into a state, 51st state. We're not going to, no politics this week. Or no, it's all just too depressing, is it not? Although, I mean, obviously there are ceasefires to be celebrated. Whether people who are taking full credit for that are to be thanked, it's a separate conversation. To my right, did I mention this last week? My dear friend Julie got me a poster, Andre Rieu poster of his Maastricht 2025 concert. That is in pride of place by my desk above my grandmother's paintings. I'm sure I've done this before on the podcast. But you know what else I've got right here above my desk? It's actually the gravestone of Lieutenant J.H.L. Drakeford, who was in the Maratha Light Infantry. He died 29th of October 1945, aged 21. He was the love of my grandmother's life. My beloved grandmother, Shirley Mullinger, who many of you have heard lots about on this podcast and read about in my book. And there is actually a lot. I possibly very wrongly neglected to tell the story of my equally beloved maternal grandmother, Frances Treasure, in my first book, something which my cousin Lucy Paris pulled me up on, and that is rectified in my second book, which incidentally I am down to the last 2 or 3 chapters of. I realise there's 2 or 3 chapters left. One needs to be done about the birth of my children. One needs to be done about getting a dog and falling in love with my dear little mini doodle Willow, who incidentally, I think I mentioned this before, my son River and I have written a book about Willow that will be published hopefully next year by Pottersfield Press. I'm getting this. This is very bad. I'm seem to be in whatever the opposite of hyperfocus is. My brain's going on. But my point is, on the book, actually, one quick question for you all. I'm down to the last few chapters, but I would love your feedback on this. This could be someone who is neurodiverse, could be someone that is interested in ADHD, has ADHD, or is or has none of it. Is just someone that could potentially read my next book. What other subjects would you like to see covered? I'm up to 40 chapters. I wanted it to be 44 chapters. I wanted it to be 100,000 words. We're well over because, as you can you can tell why I write the same way I write the same way I talk. I literally every single week I come into this and go, right, here's the list. Be focused, get it all done. And somehow, I'm now 10 minutes in and completely distracted. I'll finish this question, and I'll finish what I was saying about Mr. Drakeford, and then I will go into the sponsor read. Here's my question. Is there a subject relating to me or my ADHD or your neurodivergence or indeed neurodivergence in general that you think should be covered in this book? Something you are curious about, something you've wondered about, something that you would like to see researched, something that you would like a comedian's perspective on? Please let me know. On Lieutenant Drakeford, very quickly, I also have his cigarette holder on my desk. He is the love of my grandmother's life, who she was going to marry. He went away to war, and as it says here, at the going down of the sun, and in the morning we will remember you. He died at war, and age 21, and my grandmother then married someone who, I mean, it's not disrespectful to say Mr. Mullinger, the man she married, was a mistake, and he is actually the world champion hide and seek champion. He has not been seen since 1950. Any who read his book will realise that Houdini, Mr. Mullinger, did a runner when my dad and uncle were very, very young. Bizarrely, did a runner actually to Canada, which fits into my theory that my brother and I were always meant to find ourselves in Canada. Anyway, my grandmother maintains that everything in her life would have been different, or I guess better, or whatever, if she had married Drakeford and hadn't died. And Drakeford would of course be my name. Of course, in the olden days, if someone deserted you, you kept their name, and as a result, all of us, me, my wife, my mum, my dad, we all have this name Mullinger, of this treacherous, dastardly man who did the worst thing, pretty much one of the worst things that a man can do, which is desert his wife and two young children who were aged at the time. Maybe my uncle and dad would have been 1 and 3. He left. This guy Mullinger was the authorities tried to reach him and find him in Vancouver, where he fled. See, it's the West Coast. It's the problem. It attracts these people. No offense, West Coasters, by the way. I'm coming out there to BC next month to do some shows. So anyway, it's a fascinating thing. It's that sliding doors thing, isn't it? When you think, would my life have been different if this, if that? My grandmother often wondered that. And it's interesting that really my name would be James Drakeford had he not passed, and instead I have this name Mullinger, and my sons carry this name Mullinger, of this man that did the worst thing. Anyway, we're going to crack on with the show. It's episode 70. Before we get into it, I need to and want to give a big shout out to my friends at St. John Airport, the gateway to the world, right here in my beautiful city. And before those of you that get into the whole kind of you're in Rossay, not St. John thing, I might be in Rossay and not in St. John. I am closer to the St. John Airport than St. John. So let's not do the semantics. As I mentioned last week, I had a wonderful visit to my beloved St. John Airport to check out the Pascan Aviation planes, meet the crew, meet the pilots, sit in their chairs. If you haven't flown out of St. John Airport recently, you are seriously missing out. It has never been easier, smoother, or friendlier to travel. And thanks to Pascan Aviation, you can now fly directly from St. John to Halifax and Montreal, quick, comfortable and stress-free. There's snacks on board, there's drinks on board, there's washrooms on board. This is not the old Halifax flight of old. I should point out, it is extremely reasonably priced. It is actually basically works out the same price as getting the bus. That's right, this 9-hour bus, which, don't get me wrong, fan of the bus. Occasionally I take the bus. But Haven't done since the Pascan flights have been around, though, because it takes half an hour, and you can have a beer and some nuts on the bus. I did the flight recently, and let me tell you, it was a revelation. No long drives, no chaos, no lineups. You park for free, stroll into the terminal, and within minutes you're in the air. Before you've even finished your coffee, you're landing in Halifax. And Montreal, it's just over an hour away, perfect for work trips, weekends away, or pretending you're a jet setter for the day. Plus, the service is genuinely warm, and this is the crucial, amazing thing that Pascan Aviation do, and indeed everyone at YSJ do. You feel like a person, not a boarding pass barcode. The staff at St. John Airport and Pascan actually care that you're having a good trip. So next time you're planning to fly, skip the long road trip and start your adventure the smart way. From St. John Airport with Pascan Aviation. Support local, fly local, and actually enjoy getting there. So I should have done that 15 minutes ago. I apologise. But better late than never. And I must emphasise that there are truly incredible promo fares for flights to Halifax and Montreal on a select number of seats until the 20th. So we have 5 more days. And again, near Halloween, book for Halloween or indeed booking for December, January holiday season. Go to pascan.com and book early. If you book in the next 5 days, you are literally getting the most bargain flights, cheaper than a bus, is what I'm trying to say. So go to pascan.com. Right, before I go into what I've been doing, and that includes, yes, going to see the National Theatre last night at the St. John Theatre Company's BMO Theatre, went to see Inter Alia. Oh my goodness, Rosamund Pike, out of this world theatrical performance. But I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not like that, right? I'm going to focus on your questions because you sent me some amazing questions last week. When I got caught up in my 69er, that 69 episode, I did not get round to them. So, you know me, I'm not one to get sidetracked or land on a tangent, am I? Oh, no, James. So, here we are, the questions from last week. Mia Bruce, it says top fan. I like that Facebook top fan thing. I'm a top fan of a few places and things. Well, St. John Airport and Pascan for 2. The St. John Theatre Company being another. I went to see the Sea Dogs play on Monday. What an absolutely wonderful game. But again, 3-1 win, if you're asking. Okay, no more distractions. Mia Bruce, looking at your painting right now, by the way. I mentioned Mia Bruce before, an amazing young artist who came to my Playhouse Frederickson show last 2 years running, actually. Should I do another show at the Frederickson Playhouse next year, or should I give it a pause? There's a question back for you, Mia. Mia has a question for me. I'm looking at your painting, by the way, right now, Mia. The lobster and the maple leaf. Thank you very much. Mia's question is this: what's your dream as a comedian? Like, what do you hope for in the future? That is an excellent question, Mia, and I will answer it as honestly as I possibly can, which is that the best way I can describe this is that I perpetually flit in my mind between a genuine appreciation and surprise at and frankly just shock that I have any success whatsoever in moments of deep insecurity and self-loathing, where I'm so appreciative but also staggered that anyone would want to come and see me. I go from that, but which also is in essence an appreciation of like, wow, it's amazing that anyone would even come and see me. And I often, think about the fact that I'm truly, truly blessed with the fact that, of the millions of people around the world who possibly think about one day possibly being a performer or a stand-up comedian, which I guess is a thing that I think most people agree is. Most people, I think, do think of it as quite a difficult, not an easy job. A good example of this is the classic Seinfeld line about how Seinfeld says that when people are surveyed and asked their fears, the number one answer is public speaking and the number 2 is death. So he said if you're at a funeral, people would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. Stuart Lee, the British comedian, has a brilliantly sarcastic joke about how a firefighter comes up to him and says, "Oh, I think what you do is really brave." And Stuart Lee, in his classic style, turns around and says, "Well, I'm glad that you, of all people, recognise this," which I was reminded of actually watching the slightly toe-curling Victoria Beckham documentary on Netflix, in which Victoria Beckham described how difficult it was when, her hundreds of millions dropped to 100 million, and then it rained on the day of a fashion show, and she said it was just like being a firefighter. Isn't it quite remarkable that someone can have that little? And I should point out this was clearly a documentary commercial. It was an advertorial, essentially, in which she is the producer on it, and yet she still allowed that quote to go in, thinking it didn't paint her in a bad light. That is the sign of ego. I was watching a video actually on Instagram earlier. It was someone that was friends with or a lawyer of Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire, and they were talking about humility and the fact that when you've achieved that kind of success and wealth, and every room you walk into, every woman wants to sleep with you, or every man wants to sleep with you, and you're so powerful, and then you actually start to believe it, and how it turns people into monsters. And it's interesting because it reminded me of Reverend Ginny Wilmhoff's sermon I was telling you about last week about humility. Anyway, sorry, my point, Mia, not to get sidetracked, as if that would ever happen, is that I go from that of feeling like, my goodness, this is incredible, to then I sometimes have times of feelings of frustration where I think, wow, it would be amazing to be able to do the big things, the exciting things. This is me being completely honest. I mean, but so my overwhelming majority of the time feeling is I'm extremely blessed to do a job that most people think is hard. Most people that dream of doing it don't do it, and somehow I'm in this tiny pocket or tiny club of people who are able to feed a family and give a good life and put a roof over the head of three other people by telling jokes. That's my dream. So my party line answer, Mia, would be is that my dream is that I can, and this is true, to continue doing what I do now. For in 10 years, you, Mia, for example, would still be willing to come and see me perform live at the new Frederickson Playhouse when it opens. Or in 20 years or 30 years, or when I'm 75 or 80 years old, that people are still willing to buy tickets to see me tell jokes. That's my dream. But in wanting to be completely honest, yes, there are days when, you will look at, I don't know, watch an Adam Sandler movie and think to yourself, my goodness, wouldn't it be fun to do that? Wouldn't it be fun to be in that movie? Wouldn't it be fun wouldn't, I mean, I guess if I'm going to be honest, my dream would be for it to be less hustle for me. I love the performing, I love the touring, I love the performance, I love all of those things. What is slightly exhausting is the fact that I do everything. I book the venues, I do the promo, I do the marketing, sometimes it's me putting up the posters. So, yes, when I walk out on stage and there's 800 people there, or it's an 800 people, 1,000 people, or a standing ovation, or whatever it is, that's a great feeling. But I've put in so many hours to get there. It would be nice, possibly, if at some point, so here's my answer, Mia. It would be nice if at some point down the road that I was successful enough to not be the one doing everything. That's my answer. I hope that answers it. Thanks, Mia. God bless you, and much love to your wonderful family. Christina Simpson, hello, Christina. Thank you again for those treats that you sent for my dog, Willow. I think she's finished them now. She absolutely loves them, and I hope that your Polish celebration you were at was wonderful, and dzień dobry to you. For those of you that don't know, I am a quarter Polish, and last time I saw Christina was in Cow Bay. So her question is about those people on the cruise ship expecting a Bermuda holiday ending up in St. John. They seemed good sports though when interviewed on TV. They did indeed, Christina, and I always know when this has happened again. For those who don't know, St. John, as a port city, has cruise ships come in. I mean, often, this week, sometimes it's like 3 in a day. So suddenly the city goes from being quiet essentially to suddenly having like tens of thousands of people walking around, which is a wonderful thing to see. and occasionally people on either cruise ships get stuck here or they get rerouted here, and people have to stay here a few days, and so they get to discover St. John. Now, the great thing about Maritime's hospitality is, of course, that St. John's are the most welcoming people in the world. So people are suddenly in this place they weren't expecting to be, and they're like, what the hell is this place? And then they meet the people and see the beautiful city and see the architecture and visit our amazing restaurants, and suddenly they're over the moon. Although I always know when this has happened because I have a joke about this, and it's a routine. I believe the routine was filmed at the Capitol Theatre in Moncton 2 years ago, and whenever I suddenly see that video is being shared, hundreds more times, that is when I know it's happened again. Thank you, Christina. But you're right; they were very good sports about it on TV, but mainly because of the as I say, it's the New Brunswick or Maritimes, or indeed Canadian hospitality, and the fact that everyone is welcome so much. Simon Swangley, how are you, my friend? I hope you're doing great. It's been too long since I've seen you. Simon is a wonderful, wonderful man who, like myself, left England, moved to the Maritimes. He and his husband live in Halifax, I believe. Am I correct in saying you work for Halifax, for Irving Shipbuilding? Simon is also the proud owner, yes, he is a more proud owner of an electric car. Simon is from Blackpool. He moved here and then became friends with my other friend, Blackpool Sally Valentine. Actually, Sally, quick one. So Sally and Carl had booked tickets to see me at the Yipsider Dome. They were going to come from Halifax and stay on the Kingston Peninsula, and they had booked an Airbnb on the peninsula. The show had to move. Long story short, they needed to cancel their Airbnb. The people were obviously, again, in classic New Brunswick fashion, very nice about cancelling it. And then the couple who hadn't heard of me before came to see me at the Kingston Farmers Market and come and said, hi, we were supposed to be hosting Sally and Carl. Anyway, Do you all like hearing all my little connection stories? I mean, I'm obsessed. Here's a connection story for you. Yesterday, my wife and I had a meeting with the amazing Bernard Doucette, who is the new president, CEO, chairman, head of the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. You may have read the lengthy feature about him in the current volume of the Maritime Edit. An absolute legend, the first Acadian to hold the position of the head of the Beaverbrook. He's got amazing ideas. He's got so many amazing things happening at the Beaverbrook. Beaverbrook Art Gallery, a world-class art gallery right here in New Brunswick. It should be a sense of enormous pride for all New Brunswickers. Really, actually, if you're listening and you're not a member of the Beaverbrook, you should join. This is something which we should all embrace and love. Anyway, we have a meeting with Bernard. We've been huge admirers of him from afar, and we've been liaising a lot, obviously, over magazine features and so forth, and other things relating to the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. We finally get to meet yesterday. Pam and I go to meet with Bernard and Ray. Some of you will know Ray Cronin, who works at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. He's also the author of an amazing book on Nova Scotia folk art, which I'm looking at right now on my shelf. Anyway, long story short, we've been corresponding for months. We finally sit down together at Catapult Coffee. Within seconds, Bernard and Pam realise they were at St. John High together. That's right, they were in the same year. And again, by a bizarre coincidence, the day before, I was here in my office watching a VHS video of the production of Grease at St. John High, featuring my wife Pam and her best friend Kyla Lingley. That's right. Hi, Kyla, by the way. Kyla is one of our UK listeners. If anyone has any questions for Kyla, she is in the best part of London, which is near Greenwich. It's a place called Blackheath. It is the most beautiful Blackheath. It's the most beautiful commons, I would say, in London. It is basically, it's like Hampstead Heath for people that aren't wankers. She's in walking distance of some of the greatest pubs in the world. Hi, Kyla. Hi, Richard. So anyway, Simon, it's good to hear from you, my friend. I do hope to see you soon. It's been too long. Simon has said, please introduce the concept of direct debit to Canadians. That is interesting you mention this. So direct debit. is basically when you can transfer money from one person's bank account to another. Thank you for saying that, Simon. I'm in the process of, I have tickets on sale right now for a tour date in Oxford, Nova Scotia, in February next year. I need to pay the town for the theatre rental. They take cheques and cash, and that's it. Now, we don't have company checks due to the fact that it is not 1972. I'm not that comfortable with sending a significant amount of cash in the mail due to the fact that I love the Canada Post, don't get me wrong, but the strike is off imminently, but it's a one-on, one-off. Also, I'm not going to put over $500 of cash in the mail. They don't accept e-transfer or direct debit. Thank you, Simon. But so you know what else, Simon? In addition to introducing the concept of direct debit to Canadians, can we please introduce to Canadians the concept of being able to use a credit card, whether it be a debit or a Visa or an Amex, and not needing to say, debit or credit, debit or credit, is it debit or credit? Can't the fucking machine tell if it's a debit or a credit or not? It's a machine. The machines are taking over the world. AI's taken over the world. The computers know everything. Our phones know everything. Our phones are recording everything that we're saying and then feeding back to us all this brainwashing nonsense. And yet you're telling me that a bloody credit card machine can't tell if the card's a credit card or a debit card? Holy smoke, jumping Jesus, holy Moses, and other phrases that my father-in-law Barry would use. What is it with New Brunswick men and these phrases like merciful Moses, jumping Jesus? Anyway. Yes, why? Is it debit or credit? Debit or credit? It's slowing things down. What other things are slowing things down? There are so many things. The paying at the stupid at the pumps. You notice when the Irvings switched the machines over to the bigger screens, how everything works slower, and for some reason it never ever reads the air miles card anymore. It can't read the air miles card, so you can't collect 10,000 billion points and win yourself. I don't know. You can't even get a toaster for that. You can get the plug for the toast. You can get a piece of toast. You 10,000 millionaire miles and you get a piece of toast. Thank you, Simon. Good point. Okay, Angie McClellan, how are you? Nice. I'm so sorry. It's like an instinct. Oh, she's just saying nice. Well, thanks, Angie. It's nice to hear from you, my friend. Love to Christina and everyone else in the family. Teresa Plasoska, my beloved aunt. Thank you for the loving shout out. I, of course, was listening with pride, admiration, and supreme respect. So that's increased your known weekly UK listeners by 100%. That's why we've got 2 UK listeners now. Kyla and Teresa. We've got Kyla in Blackheath, and we have got Auntie Teresa further up north. Remind me, are you near? You're in Gloucestershire? Yes, my lovely aunt is in Gloucestershire. Did you know that your granny loved and sometimes quoted Anne of Green Gables? I won't read the next sentence, but she is going to read it now. That is fascinating because, and actually very, very useful as ever. My aunt basically is responsible for many or most of the greatest things that happened to me as a teenager. Meeting Lloyd Kaufman. She took me to an HMV launch of Trauma UK, where we met the Toxic Avenger and Sergeant Kabuki Man and Miss Trauma, and which led to me launching a fanzine about trauma films, which led to me studying journalism, which led to me getting into magazines and writing and everything else. Watching the Roy Cherry Brown film UFO with my aunt is one of the most formative moments of my childhood. We went to see comedy shows together. We went to see I went to see Rob Newman together at the Barbican. Anyway, thank you for saying this, because interestingly, my book is top and tailed with a story about Granny, your mum, Frances Treasure, and ends with my theory about a discovery that I made, a mental, emotional discovery I made while on Prince Edward Island this summer, and which the chapter kind of forms the idea that Anne of Green Gables, Anne Shirley, was probably neurodiverse. And I will point out there was another, I've received a note, who was it from, telling me about, it was Amazing Daphne, wrote to me to tell me that I will find this. Where's the email? That Daphne wrote to me to tell me that if you have the Crunchyroll streaming, I don't have the Crunchyroll streaming service, and I've never heard of it. But she says you must give the anime and Shirley a try. I will do that, Daphne. Message also from my friend Katherine Cairns, great comedian. You may remember she played my wife in the sitcom Brit Out of Water. If you haven't seen Brit Out of Water, by the way, all the episodes are now free on YouTube to watch. She didn't want me to share this, but it was a joke she's giving me, a total throwaway joke. But when you talk about your ADHD, because I talk about mine on stage, she doesn't talk about hers on stage, although she does talk very hilariously and ingeniously and intelligently about her autism on stage. And you should go check out her. There's a great clip shot by the brilliant Tyler Warren Ellis on Catherine's Instagram feed right now. If you want to see it, I'll share it. She said I should talk about the fact that in the Maritimes it's not ADHD, it's ADHD, right? You know how you guys say H in the same way that if you have 10, you lose the S on the end of beers. You say, I had 10 beer, but then you add the S to things like Kent. We're going to Kent. It's not Kent, it's Kent, and it's not 10 beer, it's 10 beers, and it's not ADHD, it's ADHD. Anyway, she thinks it's a terrible joke. I actually think it was hilarious. I read it and it made me laugh. Very quickly, I'm going to do a quick, little advertiser read, and then we will get back to where we were, all of your amazing questions. And indeed, we haven't even got to the exciting week that I have had. Heading out of St. John Airport, Pascan Aviation has you covered with flights to Halifax, Montreal and Quebec City. Friendly service Monday to Friday. One free checked bag. Finally, a bag that doesn't cost more than your plane ticket. Promo fares available at www. I know you don't need the www, but some people do. There are some people that are still confused. See, there are some people, someone was giving me an email address the other day, and they said, it's www. I know that's not an email address, but I'm just using this as an example because I can't give you the actual email address because I don't want the person to know that I'm laughing at them because I know they listen to this podcast. But they go www.com and then they go all lowercase. It's not case sensitive. No email and no website has ever been case sensitive, but there is a certain generation that doesn't know that. It's the generation that still have email addresses. Like, you know how young people young people don't use email anymore. This is the thing. Young people, I can't get them to email me now. You know? Oh my God, my youngest son tried to refer to how old my wife and I were by saying, well, you wouldn't get it because you're millennials. And I mean, does it not literally feel like yesterday that millennial was the insult that we all used for the young and the arrogant and the cocky and the... But I now realise that was me in an office 20 years ago complaining about millennials. Millennials are now the old ones. And weird, like the ancient ones. But I couldn't believe it. He's like, well, you wouldn't get it because you're millennials. It's like, no. We're literally we're Generation X. I'll have you know, you are the best generation. Yeah. Anyway, finally, a bag doesn't cost more than your plane ticket. Promo fares at www.pascan.com. Grab yours before they finish. There's special offers right now. All lowercase. Okay, here we go. I think we're up to the final question. This is from my dear friend, Jane Chrysostom. Jane, and I apologize if I'm always mangling your surname, but my ADHD brain cannot read out complicated surnames, and I say that as James Mullinger. Jane has asked the question, tell us about your first crush. Any cringy moments to share. Use as much comparable British romance vernacular as possible, but not 69. This was a question for last week. Okay, Jane. Well, it's interesting you should ask this now because obviously in the process of writing a second memoir, I have been looking back at my childhood again and also revisiting in terms of therapy, but publicly visiting for the first time certain aspects of my childhood that I left out of the first book due to the fact that either A, I felt too embarrassed to write about or traumatized to write about, or indeed was quite determined. When you obviously ridiculous privilege and blessing to be gifted the opportunity to write even one memoir, especially at the age of 40. Well, I was 44 when I wrote the first one, I think, and obviously as a fairly unknown, unsuccessful comedian. But I guess to answer, go back to Mia's question from earlier, like my dream was always that one day I would write a book. I would say that that was my number one dream. The fact I'm getting to write a second book that is, again, the fact that there's enough interest in the ridiculous stories of my life. And as I said at the end of the first memoir, my Aunt Teresa, who I mentioned earlier, said to me to go and live a crazy life and write about it. And that's literally what I've done. So possibly of the many pieces of advice that I both was given and indeed courted, and by courted, I guess I mean, and this comes up a lot in my keynote speeches. I'm doing a series of speeches, actually, keynote presentations next month for NBCC in St. John, Fredericton, Moncton and Miramichi, in which I'm talking about the fact that as a teenager, and again, some of you listening who knew me back then will know that I forged a pen pal relationship with Kate Winslet that spanned, a dozen or so long, detailed, heartfelt, emotional, deep dive letters, pre-therapy letters, back and forth. And basically, I mean, quite a precocious child at the age of 13, 14, 15, I'm writing to my writing and journalism and magazine heroes and comedy heroes, asking for advice and asking what I should do. So I got a lot of advice and basically pretty much did all of it, and then everything worked out, and I'm now doing all the jobs that I dreamed of. I guess that's going back to Mia's question, but to focus on what was I saying? Yes, my answer is going to be crazy. So the fact that I'm getting to write the second book, I'm looking back at childhood. I actually found my Levers book from school. So Jane, to answer your question, there was a lot of crushes. I like the character of Marianne in Sense and Sensibility. I have no sense, only sensibility. Like Anne Shirley in Anne of Green Gables, I'm a romantic, which meant that I had a lot of crushes. Everyone that I had a crush on, I basically fell head over heels in love with, wrote very embarrassing poems. Would anyone like to hear my embarrassing I still have a couple of my love poems that I wrote, which I will happily read out. But I found my Levers book. So all of these subjects are being discussed in my... So to go through shall I go through the list of names of crushes? Well, the first one would have been my oldest, dearest, best friend, Lizzie. Maybe I shouldn't use surnames for this. Well, she knows. I was actually just messaging Lizzie this morning, thinking it'd be Lizzie, and Lizzie, my dear friend Lizzie, back in my hometown of Maidenhead, she lost both her parents in the last year, and I can't imagine what it's like. We're obviously both the same age. Lizzie and I were literally friends at a few months old, growing up in Maidenhead, and so many of my earliest memories are with Lizzie. Actually, my other close friend from that era, Laura, who again also our age, actually herself tragically passed 2 months ago at our age, so 47 years old. Day after Father's Day, spent the weekend with her husband and 2 children. They had plans to go to, interestingly, again, and we'd somewhat lost touch, and we would hear about each other through our parents. Our parents are still extremely close friends. And Laura had this, her and her husband were going to take their kids to Toronto to show them where they got engaged, which again, I didn't know they got engaged in Toronto. And long story short, they had an amazing family weekend together. Laura was a very senior lawyer. So very busy all the time. They had this wonderful weekend, and then on the Sunday, the day after Father's Day, on the Monday, she just had a aneurysm and just passed on the spot. Just sat down and then ceased. So anyway, lots of sadness recently. In our lives, all tangents. So anyway, my point being, to answer your question, Jane, I had multiple questions. Yeah, Lizzie, Laura, going to school years, I will try and remember in order. Cindy, Catherine, Anna, and then going into university, Meg. And then I met my wife and fell in love, and then that's the love of my life, the last question I ever heard. But anyway, so the point being, so I do have plenty of embarrassing stories to share. Actually, I mean, it's interesting reading my Levers book. So here's a note this is from Catherine, who was one of my crushes around 15, So she's writing this in 1996, so 30 years ago, when I'm leaving school to go off to not much at the time. Hello, how are you? Well, what can I say? Again, don't read comments. These are old. These aren't about comedy. I suppose I can read these. Basically, you're great. I'd like to congratulate you on a lot of things, such as possibly being the funniest bloke I've met. I must have a sick sense of humour. And if I ever felt crappy, I could always count on you to make me laugh and cheer me up. Interesting. I have not read this in a long time. You are amazing to talk to, as you seem to know everything, have so many opinions, and are so enthusiastic. A very interesting guy. Your stories are great. You were always so honest and blatant that you're one of those weird people I feel I could tell anything. Interesting. Okay, maybe I should go through and check these before I read any more. Here's another one of my crushes is here. Cindy, she has written a note. Interestingly, we ended up getting to know each other again later in life. So you're leaving. Well, I'd better take this opportunity to mention something that we have never talked about since. Well, if you remember, when I was in the third form and you were in the fourth year, we used to go out together. That would have been 13 and 14 years old. It wasn't for very long, and I don't know if I can even say that it was short but sweet. We used to get on quite well in those days. Not that we don't now, but it was different. This is not really meant to be a goodbye, because seeing as we live in the same town, we're bound to meet up or bump into each other. I think that Kate Winslet has got you pretty much sorted. You're a wicked bloke. Sorry, this is weird. I don't know if this is even interesting for you guys. Me reading out old... Dear James, well, your unique reign at King Edward's has come to an end. I'll certainly never forget you, because you're a bloody great bloke. I reckon you deserve to go far in life. Most of these messages are kind of people telling me to look after myself. Try not to die of a drugs overdose, alcohol poisoning before you are 30. Or is that asking too much? Love, Catherine. So that's someone I had a major crush on. Interesting. It's funny. It's recent. Lots of people in this Leavers book are making reference to this video diary that I filmed. I filmed in the last 2 weeks of being at school, age 18. So again, 30 years ago. Filmed what it was like at this English boarding school. And weirdly, last week I found the VHS tape and started to watch it with my son. Had to turn it off very, very quickly, due to not wanting him to see what I was actually like. But do I have... Okay, so Jane, I will come back to you. How about this? I will come back to you next week with some embarrassing crush stories. As you can tell from the things I've just read, there are many. I'll tell you, Jane, the most embarrassing crush story I have, which is one that is a chapter in a book. A girl I met called Claire at W.H. Smith's in Maidenhead. We fell in love. We dated a few months. We knew she was going travelling around the world for a year, so we agreed we would just date, call it a day when she left, and not feel attached or obliged or anything like that. It was the most whirlwind romance. And then 2 months later, whenever she left, I was absolutely heartbroken, devastated. She left. It's one of the rare moments as a child, teenager, young person, that I kind of got myself into shape, stopped drinking and smoking and eating kebabs every night, and went to the gym and got myself in great shape, and then flew out to Bali to meet her for her birthday, only to discover when I got there that we had broken up and I hadn't realised. And I arrived at the airport to go and kiss her, and she's like, whoa, what the hell are you doing? And I'd also accidentally, I do this, I've done this a lot in my life, kind of self-sabotage, somehow got absolutely annihilated drunk on the plane on the 20. I remember, and it was in the smoking flight days as well, so I started smoking again on the 24-hour flight over. So I arrived there hammered and dumped and unaware that she'd broken up with me. Felt very hard done by, spent the week with her, climbed a volcano, did lots of things, carried on as friends, although I was utterly heartbroken. And then years later, I find a letter from her, which she had sent me, in which she had basically broken up with me, or kind of written to say, look, we should call it a day. You're there, I'm here. Life's going to go in different directions. Let's be friends. And I think this is an ADHD thing, or it's a me thing. I don't know what it is. Somehow I'd read this letter and chosen to not see not fully comprehend what I know. It makes me sound like an absolute psychopath. So, Jen, you asked embarrassing stories. This is as embarrassing as it gets. I was broken up. I was dumped by letter. Read the letter, and for some reason my brain didn't compute. And granted, I mean, it wasn't. It was vague, but it was pretty. With the benefit of hindsight, it was a pretty clear breakup letter, and my brain didn't compute it. And this has happened to me a few times over the years with things, not in relationship scenarios, but where I've read something and maybe my brain hasn't wanted to take in the negative thing. And then, of course, there's other times where you can only see the negative. I think this is a neurodivergence thing. Anyway, so I've had those questions. Those are all the questions. Thank you all so much. Let's move on to what I've been up to. Like I mentioned last week, it was my son's 15th birthday. Took him and his mates to Boston Pizza on Friday. They had a sleepover party. Fun. While they were at Boston Pizza, I went to Second Spin Records in St. John. Bought my wife's birthday present Coldplay, my son's Kanye, and bought myself an album called Maple Sugar: Songs of Early Canada. Beautiful vinyl. I'll post a picture of this on the IG, featuring Stompin' Tom Connors, St. John's Own, Harry Hibbs, Eleanor Moorhead, Queen of the Canadian Fiddle, and a country combo, and the University of Guelph Folk Choir. Doesn't that sound absolutely wonderful? My friend Jay McLean, famously, is Stompin' Tom's biggest fan. And actually, his sister, Jenny, has an audio recording of Stompin' Tom doing a shout-out to Jay, his number one fan, at Harbour Station. Okay, I'll quickly do the movies I watched over the weekend. The Woman in Cabin 10, currently number one on Netflix, with Keira Knightley. Read the book. It was a part of that, that horribly, when one book does well and is successful, and they just churn out hundreds of books identical. It's almost like AI, but back when people just copied crap, and it was still the same shit as AI. But Girl on the Train was a very, very successful book by Paula Hawkins, and then someone else did. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn came out, and that was amazing. And the film of that is amazing. Gone Girl was a masterpiece, but then the unreliable female narrator became a trope, and it became that they knew if they released books with unreliable female narrators, which is somewhat a misogynistic thing, but also somewhat highlighted the problems with the patriarchy. There was Woman in Cabin 10. There was The Woman in the Window, which again by A.J. Finn, which was a book. I believe he was a book publisher or a book agent who wrote the book, kind of just wrote knowing what would be successful, and then did it under a pen name. Woman in Cabin 10 was one of the 10 female narrator garbage books, trash books, which was quite fun to read. The movie doesn't work because it completely hinges, the whole plot, which might work in literary form, definitely doesn't work on film form, hinges on us believing that everyone would not recognize their dear friend if they were switched out, not to give the twist away. Also that night watched The Lost Bus with Matthew McConaughey, which is very good, although only Matthew McConaughey would have the staggering ego to go, oh, what? An amazing, heroic person saved a load of school children from the California fires. I'm that hero. It reminds me of that Louis C.K. routine about Matt Damon and the arrogance of Matt Damon writing Good Will Hunting for himself. And yeah, it's just that funny thing of just imagining Matthew McConaughey going, oh, saving a load of children, that sounds like something I would do. Anyway, quickly whiz through been watching the new episodes of Graham Norton. It was interesting watching Taylor Swift on Graham Norton the other week. I think I was supposed to talk about that last week and I forgot. Taylor Swift was on with Lewis Capaldi. Now, I adore Lewis Capaldi. Does anyone else know and love Lewis Capaldi? What I think I've talked about him a few times on this show. I saw the documentary recently, Lewis Capaldi, How I'm Feeling Now, and you may know him as the singer-songwriter behind the best-selling album in the UK in both 2020 and 2021. That's the same album 2 years in a row. An amazing artist who's been open about his struggles with mental health, anxiety, fame. He took a lot of time off, but came back this year to Glastonbury, and you've got to see the footage. And what will blow you away is just how real he is. Here's this insanely talented singer-songwriter, crippled by nerves and insecurities, yet somehow he's just the most normal, humble, down-to-earth guy you could ever meet. He just is who he is. It's just such a rare thing. And watching the documentary, you found yourself fascinated, Oh, I certainly did. I was so fascinated by the idea of talent, like this mysterious gift. Like whether it's Lewis Capaldi or Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran, are they born with it? Is it something they've honed over years of obsession and practice? It's the same question I find myself thinking of athletes like Rory McIlroy or the Williams sisters. How much of what they do is natural talent and how much is sheer hard work? Like, if the Williams sisters hadn't been kind of beaten and shouted at by their dad, King Richard, would they have got where they were? And it basically, if someone can put a ball in a net or a hole or hit one out of a park, they're basically financially set for life. But for musicians, it's more complicated. You've got to write the song, and Capaldi is just he wrote the song, and it just, to me, it just blows me away, because I just don't get why one person. I mean, to my mind, again, my friend Ethan Ash, who, his song "Breakfast" is as good, if not better, than anything that Lewis Capaldi. I mean, on a par with. I don't want to compare people, but I could see Ethan Ash performing "Breakfast" in Wembley Stadium to 100,000 people. And I don't get why one person gets it and one doesn't. And they're both born with this talent, and they both work hard. Anyway, but I should point out, very quickly do the show plugs. Ethan and I are actually performing, not at Wembley Arena, at Wembley Stadium. We're performing next Friday, the 24th of October, at the Hampton Brewing Company. The night before, on Thursday, the 23rd, I'll be at the Lily Lake Pavilion for the Romero House, Roaring for Romero House fundraiser. Get tickets for that. It's maybe our 5th year in a row. Romero House, feed our friends in need. Pardon me, didn't mean to burp. Romero House, feed our friends in need, and the show is always an absolute phenomenal night of comedy and music. On the Tuesday, I'm doing a gig actually for corporate gig in Fredericton at the convention centre there, and then this Saturday night I'm at the Moncton Delta performing for actually a celebration of 60 years of the Moncton Hospital. So anyway, those are the plugs. I've done the okay. I'm going to leave you with this. Because I do have some other things to cover, which I will get to next week, but I keep forgetting to do them. They're new stand-up specials by the comedians Andrew Santino and Matt McCusker, slightly both forgettable. I should point out my stand-up special, Almost Canadian, has just been added to Next Up Comedy in the UK. So if you are in the UK and would like to watch Almost Canadian, is on Next Up Comedy. It's one of those things that I didn't even hear about. Just suddenly started getting tagged in Instagram posts by this massive comedy streaming service in the UK. Well, I will say, because I'm going to leave you today with what I did last night, which is truly one of the highlights. Well, I should say, I mentioned this earlier, but massive hats off to the Sea Dogs for their 3-1 win, and thank you to my dear friend Andre for inviting us on Thanksgiving Monday to Harbour Station, to TD Station, for the Sea Dogs game. Had so much fun just being there with friends, family, absolutely beautiful time. Last night I went to see the National Theatre live at the St John Theatre Company's BMO Theatre. I'm going to get to that very quickly. I'm going to get the stand-up specials out of the way. Andrew Santino, White Noise. You might have heard of him. No, it's not Santino, Santiago. What's his name? No. Andrew Santino is his name. Again, it's very forgettable. He's a comedian who he does a podcast, I believe, with Bobby Lee, which has made him huge. And because the podcast is huge, he then gets stand-up specials, which he's either not ready for or rushes out. Because, I think possibly like most comedians, he's done like the one on Netflix or the one on YouTube first that has all his best stuff from 20 years, and then gets a deal to do another one, and then is basically workshopping the material in front of fans who just cheer and laugh at everything he does, and then the material doesn't end up being as good. That's not me being rude, it's just a fact of how these things work. He's never going to hear this. Matt McCusker, I saw had a stand-up special out. I was like, who on earth is that? Many of you will know that he's a comedian and podcaster, and basically a collaborator of Shane Gillis. Shane Gillis, number 1 comedian in the world right now. In terms of box office gross, I believe. I mean, outselling like everyone from Seinfeld to Matt Rife. Not sure if you heard, actually, that Nikki Glazer is coming to a great outdoors comedy festival in Halifax next year, which, again, I might have to break my rule of not seeing American comedians for Nikki Glazer. Anyway, we will see. No, you know what? I will. If I get offered a free ticket, I'll go. Otherwise, I'm not going to put money into America. I'm going to stick to my elbows up. Anyway, Matt McCusker, His stand-up special is called, what's it called? I can't remember. That's out. Anyway, it's not bad. His comedy style's a bit different from Shane's, where Shane is kind of, big character driven. Matt is kind of dry, philosophical. He's got this sort of low-key, mischievous intelligence, kind of guy who'll go off on a tangent about human evolution, fatherhood, or spirituality, and kind of make it hilarious. A good special. Again, one of these things we just go, how and why did this person get this? And other comedians that are just as good, if not 10 times better, don't get it. Well, it's very simple. It's like building your own audience. These guys build their audience on podcasts that, unlike this one, are listened to by tens of millions of people. But anyway, I still appreciate there's a few thousand of you, and I massively appreciate every single one of you. Again, still, I'm not someone who goes through life thinking, oh, why aren't there millions of people? I go through life thinking, I cannot believe that thousands of people are kind enough to listen to this podcast. And it's thrown up some of the most joyful experiences of my life, like after doing a gig at the Monkston Hospital in January this year, walking through the wards afterwards, and a lady was lying in bed in hospital, having just had something terrible happen, and she's listening to my podcast, and I walked past, and she thought she was hallucinating. That is what I live for. Anyway, finally, I'll leave you with this before I rush off to get breakfast ready for the family. Last night I went to see Inter Alia at the BMO Theatre, the St John Theatre Company's BMO Theatre. It is part of the National Theatre Live. Globally, the National Theatre in London shows, they film in front of a live audience their productions, and interestingly leave in mistakes. Rosamund Pike plays the lead. It is a phenomenal play. Not that there's many mistakes, but if there is a fumble or a prop goes wrong, they leave it in. Now, these things are traditionally shown in cineplexes. I will point out Stephen Tobias, in his ongoing mission to improve, this isn't why he does it, but at the end of the day, has there ever been anyone that has done more for the cultural fabric and community of New Brunswick arts than Stephen Tobias? The National Theatre Live used to be at the Cineplex in St John, as they are everywhere else in the country and the world. Not enough people went, sadly, which is why they ceased to be, which makes sense. That's business. Thankfully, enough people are still going to the Andre Rieu concerts at the Cineplex, and indeed the Met operas, of which there's many more coming up. Anyway, Stephen, as if he hasn't got enough going on with producing the greatest ever production of Come From Away and hundreds of other productions all year round. The list of things happening. Let's go to stjohntheatrecompany.com right now if you want to see. Well, they're doing the Christmas Carol at the Imperial Theatre this Christmas from November 19th to the 22nd. Every single production they do is off the charts incredible. And he's the busiest man I know. I don't know how he does it all. Meanwhile, he's building a whole new theatre space. He's just, Stephen Tobias is literally deserves whatever the OBE is in Canada, Order of Canada. Someone give it to him now. If anyone's listening that wants to get that ball rolling, count me in to do whatever it takes to get to it. So here's the thing. Inter Alia. It might be pronounced Inter Alia or Inter Alia. I did, before this podcast began, Google that thing with how to pronounce Inter Alia, which is Latin, and a very confusing foreign accent. Is that racist to say a confusing foreign accent? No, it was very confusing because the accent that was giving out the Inter Alia explanation was very strong. I don't know what strong means. It's weird. Canadians sometimes say to me, oh, do we have accents? And it's like, yeah, you have an accent. Yeah, you have an accent, and that's Texan. Anyway, helpfully the voice said, it's going to be racist now when I do the voice. Anyway, you won't be able to tell what accent this is. So it's not racist because it's not an accent. It's just a made-up voice. The voice said something like, how to pronounce Inter Alia. It's either Inter Alia or Inter Alia. Well, thanks a bloody bunch. We knew it was one of the two. Anyway, so last night I had this. It was truly one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever had in a cinema, and I wasn't watching a film. And well, it wasn't even a cinema, looking at a screen, I should say. And I should say the St. John Theatre Company, in their mission to make this as special as possible, had a brand new screen fitted. The sound in there was phenomenal. I was at the St John Theatre Company's BMO Theatre for the National Theatre Live's broadcast of Inter Alia or Inter Alia, depending on which pronunciation you prefer. It's the new play by Susie Miller starring Rosamund Pike. Rosamund Pike, famously, of course, in Gone Girl. Amazing in that. Prior to that, she's one of the few girls that's been a Bond girl actress that has gone on to be to prove herself to be one of the greatest actresses of all time. Now, I say this without exaggeration. I was absolutely blown away. Rosamund Pike deserves to win every award going. I don't think I've ever seen a performance quite like it. She's on stage for 2 hours straight, and the emotional range she has to deliver is just astonishing. It's one of those rare performances where you just forget you're watching acting. You're just in it. Now, without giving anything away, what Pike has to juggle, the emotional, physical and technical demands of this role, is absolutely wild. She's like dancing on a dining table, she's ironing, she's leaning on the ironing board, she's changing costumes, expressing heartbreak, rage, joy, guilt, anger, all on stage, all in real time. It is flabbergasting. Susie Miller's writing gives her this extraordinary kind of playground of emotion, and Pike uses every inch of it. Now, for those of you that don't know, Inter Alia, it's actually, I didn't know this until afterwards. Stephen told me it's a companion piece to a play that Susie Miller had written before. Inter Alia follows Jessica Parks, who's a top Crown Court judge, brilliant, respected, seemingly in control of everything, but behind that robe, she's also a karaoke fiend, a loving wife, a devoted parent. And something happens that upends her world, and the play becomes like a searing indictment, an examination of modern motherhood, power, and masculinity. Now, here's the thing. I actually think that possibly seeing it at the cinema might be better than seeing it live in London. There's the intimacy of the close-ups, the sound design, the cinematography. In a space like the BMO, it felt bigger and more immersive than the National Theatre itself. And let's be honest, it's also $20 ticket or $25 ticket instead of $500, which makes it a very easy choice. So anyway, massive kudos to Stephen Tobias and his team for making this happen. The work he's doing to bring National Theatre Live to St. John is phenomenal, and it's truly a gift to have access to world-class theatre right here at home. Not that we don't already have access to world-class theatre, because Stephen and his team at the St. John Theatre Company are constantly putting on world-class productions. Now, a little personal moment for me. Because before the play began, and the audience was made up of basically St. John theatrical loyalty, Sandra Bell, Grant Heckman, Jeff McAloon, Brian Goodwin, Anthony Allen, obviously Stephen and his wife. I also met James, who was the star of the most recent play, Cottages and Indians, is that the one? Anyway, so I know Stephen is currently right now driving him to this Halifax airport. Before the play starts, they showed this Sky Arts reel, because Sky sponsors these National Theatre Live broadcasts. And I couldn't help but laugh because every single clip featured comedians. Lenny Henry, Vic Reeves, Frank Skinner, even Danny Dyer popped up. Now, for me as a Brit, sitting in a St. John theatre, watching Frank Skinner on the big screen was most surreal and joyful, especially since my first book was about Danny Dyer, and my second book, the first book before Brit Happens, it was a co-authorship, but my new book, which is my second memoir and third book, which I've, like I say, almost finished, features a whole chapter on Frank Skinner and on Danny Dyer. So it was a full circle moment. Anyway, Inter Alia, absolute must-see. Rosamund Pike is electric. The writing is razor sharp, and it's one of those stories that lingers long after you leave the theatre. I have to be honest, I just cried the whole way home. Still feel quite disturbed now. But the best news is the next National Theatre Live showing at the BMO Theatre is Mrs. Warren's Profession, starring Imelda Staunton. Yes, that's Imelda Staunton and her daughter. It's on November the 4th at the BMO Studio Theatre. Tickets are just $25. It's the hottest cultural ticket in town, and I can't believe more people actually weren't at Inter Alia last night. I believe some of them, if you can actually shockingly believe this, were expressing major elbows down tendencies and watching an American comedian. So I hope you... it's great that all that money goes back to Trumpy Wumpy's little pockets. But anyway, support the St. John Theatre Company. A huge thank you to Stephen Tobias and everyone at the St. John Theatre Company for making nights like this possible. And if you've never experienced National Theatre Live, give it a go. Trust me, there's nothing quite like seeing world-class theatre shot beautifully for cinema, surrounded by your own community. That has been Mullinger's Weekly Ramble. I'm sorry that it's been a bit of a ramble. Again, every single week for 70 episodes. I promise next week's will be a little bit tighter. Who knows if it will be. Just a little reminder, thank you so much to our friends and our partners at St. John Airport and Pascan Aviation. And just remember, you have 5 more days to get very, very special offers for the coming weeks. Book for December, January holiday, book for Halloween, book for any one of the long weekends, but Remembrance Day weekend. There's promo fares now to Halifax and Montreal on a very, very select number of seats. So go to pascan.com now and book early. Thank you very much. I've been James Mullinger. You've been absolutely wonderful. Please send your questions to jamesmullinger@gmail.com. God bless you. Love you all very much. Goodbye.
Mullinger's Weekly Ramble.